Well, I'm Chris, and this is my Volkswagen engine building failure nightmare slash case inspection video. So a week ago, exactly to the hour, I took this to the machine shop. I was so excited. I had my notes written out of all my questions. Guy looks at it from 10 feet away. He goes, "Nah, I can't build that." I started laughing. I said, "Nah, really?" He goes, "Nah, I'm not touching it." So that brings us to our first important part. You need to take this to a machine shop that only messes with these, and for some reason, they will only mess with air-cooled Volkswagen engines. And honestly, I just thought he didn't feel like messing with it. Well, I came home, watched Dune Buggy Warehouse case inspection video. I bought this book right here. I actually like this book a lot. It speaks my language. And with that book and the Dune Buggy Warehouse video, I have to give credit where it's due. I started to figure out why he did that to me. So I went in there and I told him I wanted it bore 90.5 millimeters and I was going to run a 76 millimeter stroke crank. And that's why he was like, no, that's not going to happen. So keep that in mind. I wanted to bore it out and run a stroke or crank. What was he looking at? But at the end of it, he says you might get away with a stalker. So if you've made it as far as getting your case split apart, good for you. I'm proud of you, especially if it's your first time. So I've been out here about 4 times trying to figure out what happened. Why did it spin a bearing? And I figured it out. Why does this picture exist on the internet? I absolutely hate this picture. It's not even in the right orientation. Who even looks at the crank that way? So that picture set me back about an hour and a half of my life. First thing to note on this engine is that these pistons are a little bit more this way. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4. And it is confusing, but looking at it would be 3, 1, 4, 2. So that picture has these two switched. Maybe the guy or girl building this engine was looking at that picture when they built it because they didn't pay attention to the numbers on the rods. We have it in there in the correct orientation now with the bump up and those 2 little notches down. A lot of engines of this time period, those notches go down and out. This is number 1 cylinder, and you can see we have number 4 piston. So you can see like a very vague factory number stamped on there. They started to put the 4 dots and had a case of the diarrheas, came back, marked the wrong side, didn't even care which rod went in which order, had the cap on there upside down, spun a bearing. All of this will need to be machined, all these rods resized because we have no idea what's going on. But I'm not using this crank or rod, so this is scrap. So on these VW cases, the line bore is the most critical thing on them. And just by looking at that fat bearing, he knew that it had already been line bored. So when the cases have machine work on them, that means somebody's already been in here. And that wasn't enough. But when he saw this one, that was why he said he didn't want to work on it. So it's been line bored and it's been thrust cut. And I said, but how is that enough to not want to mess with it though? I said, this bearing's in there tight. And he's like, yeah, it's in there tight, but that doesn't mean anything. And then he came over here to this front one. And he's like, well, that one slides back a little bit. And I'm still confused. So what he did was he pulled these bearings out. So these magnesium cases, this is where they take all the abuse right here. So if you feel anything, that's why you always see people running their fingernails right here. That means that case has been beat up and it needs a line bore. This one has oil passage kind of built up. Okay, then it feels like a little knife on this outside edge. Feels okay. This one feels screwed up. This one feels okay. So if you feel anything weird right there, it needs a line bore. This one has already been line bored 20 thousandths. All right, so this is a picture on the internet that I do like. When you mic it in inches, those numbers are what you're looking for right there. So for your case bore, you're measuring the outside of the bearing. Zero it out, we're in inches. About 2.58, so 2.58 would be 20 thousandths. Let's check another one. So keep in mind, this tool right here is just going to give you an idea, get you close. So we can say that we've had this line bored once over 20 thousandths. It would also turn out that that crank had already been turned 10 thousandths. So the fact that the crank was already machined 10 thousandths, that wasn't the deal breaker. That didn't matter. He never even checked the crank. He was looking at that line bore oversized, red flag, and then the thrust cut. Let's talk about this. So you're gonna look down there and you can see how it's cut out a little bit. That was a thrust cut that was done, and they use an oversized bearing right here. The bearing should look the same on both sides. See how that side's fat? That's how he could tell looking at it from 10 feet away. So here's another picture on the internet that I like. There are gonna be 27 millimeters width, but mine should be 3.5 millimeters there. Okay, so we got the 27. Okay, that's good. Measure that one. 2.5 millimeters. This should be 3.5 millimeters. There you go. Oversized thrust cut. So they went in there, buzzed it down. I guess it just mashes all this up. So they cut 1 millimeter out of it. Oversized bearing, problem solved. So let's talk about the thrust cut a little bit more. And every time you push that clutch down, you're smashing this. This is your flywheel. It's running straight against that thrust bearing. But they put these 3 shims. If you look at this shim, it's kind of smashed up and distorted. So obviously this was probably riding against the flywheel. There's a little bit of clearance in there. So it has a little bit of movement back and forth. So whenever this gets loose, this gets damaged, maybe your case gets damaged, it's going to have play in there. They sell that little magnet with that little dial indicator, and you're checking the play in it. And look in the book, and there's a certain amount that if it's too much, they recommend rebuilding your engine. So if you have too much play in there, every time you're slamming that clutch, that crank is going to be going back and forth in there like that. I don't know if it just slams back or if it bounces back. I have no idea, but it's not what you want. And that's just an idea what the thrust bearing does and why they have to cut it. So we can go to this other side with a screwdriver that I haven't touched. Got this little lip right there. Once you start learning more, I realized it's already been line bored, and now this line board needs to be line bored again. It started making sense to me. I started calming down. I'm not mad anymore. So another thing, he pointed out this corrosion right here, that when you start trying to crank down on them threads, you could pull them out. He said that one right there is probably going to end up pulling out stripped. And once you start getting your hands on it, it starts making more sense and more sense. That hole looks stripped out. Here's a little stud. It is stripped out, look. Dang it. Oh, never mind. Look, he was talking about this side. Look at that. There you go. I guess he was not bull crapping me. So this is an AE. So this wasn't even the original engine in that car. Notice we have 10 millimeter studs. So I was going to have this board. So when you have a board, you have to pull these studs out. So what happens on these cases is when you start taking old stuff out, the threads will strip. It'll just break the threads and they'll come right out with the studs. Let's see if we could just demonstrate that. Okay, so when I was taking these heads off, I remember these two being super tight, this one being normal, this was loose, and one of these others were loose too. That is a bad sign already. That means that we put everything back together, we're torquing our head bolts, which I don't think the torque is very much on them, and they'll just start pulling right out. You'll strip that head bolt right out of there. Pull one out randomly, and let's see how much threads it takes on a total random one. Okay, well that came out perfect, no threads on it. I don't know, this one's good too. So remember I said these two were tight. This was the tightest one of all of them. And would you look at that? 100% strip thread on that super tight one. Okay, now this one looks good. In this case, we would get a case saver for a 10 millimeter stud and tap that. Now, another thing about that, this case was steel. We could get away with doing it by ourselves, but since it's a soft metal, you can't play games putting one in by hand because it's not going to take very much of that hole to get crooked down there, and it's going to throw this head stud off a whole bunch. I would not try to put a case saver in free-handed. You're going to take it to a shop, they're going to square the block 100% with a drill press, come down here and do it perfect. You've been warned. I went ahead and stuck it back together, and I had no clue on earth about this one. Dune Buggy Warehouse, the only person that actually took the time to demonstrate it is Gaposis. You're going to look down there with the light. You torque it to spec, and you'll see gaps in between where the case splits on the little bearing journals. You'll see light poking through. This one's good. This one doesn't have it. There's no light poking through. So this case does not have Gaposis. Love that word. So then the other stuff they're talking about is just going through here, cleaning this off real good and looking for any kind of cracks. So number 3 is right here. This is the one they say that's weak. There's something and it'll crack right there. Oh, it's literally weak because look, it's like that's all that's there. So this is threaded into the block, so check the threads there. Make sure there's no cracks here. You're just going to have to clean it up really, really good. Take it out in a good light and check every little thing. And that's why I'm making this video, that in 2023, if you have a Beetle that's running good for you, run that thing until it explodes. If you have a Beetle out there that you haven't got it running yet, this is what you do. Go try to turn the crank. You should be able to turn this by hand. That engine should turn over. If it doesn't, get a crescent wrench, try to spin that engine over. By design, they're kind of cursed because if any water goes in there, it goes straight down in there. All this stuff lays flat. Any valve that's open, it's going to go in that cylinder bore and rust like crazy. That's why these things are locked up all the time. Try to keep yours running until it blows up, because if we would have done a preventive rebuild on that one to freshen it all up because we have the money or time, just kind of reminds me of an egg. Once you crack it, you can't really put it back together. You could, but it wouldn't be right. So if you already have one that runs, keep it running like this one. I see everybody start their Beetles like that. They kind of spin it over 3 or 4 times and then they push the gas down. Like that. Everybody starts them like that. I started doing that and then I started watching videos and noticed everybody does that. Thing runs good. That was a cold start. You know, I've been Houston, Texas, it cooled down, and these things really like colder weather better. I know that's loose. I still have to adjust the valves. This thing runs really good. So if you're trying to build you a fast air-cooled engine, stay out of the forums. Go to a machine shop. Even if you got to drive a couple of hours to get there, you meet them in person. So if you start popping off that hot rod bull crap like I did, they're not going to try to work with you as if you would have went in there saying, I just want to do a rebuild. This is a perfect candidate for a rebuild. We're going to have to get it line bored for the second time. We could totally get those parts reworked if we wanted to build a stock engine. So I was only talking to him for about 10 minutes. And the reason that I got mad is because he kept hinting at me to just buy a new case. And I'm like, dude, they're like $1,200, $1,300, $1,400. And he's like, well, he goes, think about that. He goes, after we line bore it, clean it, bore it out, do the case savers, he goes, you're going to be looking at about $800. But on this particular engine, since it had metal inside of it, they want to take these out, drill them so that they can inspect the oil galleys and then cap them. There's more money right there. The point he was trying to make that, yeah, you can get this thing all done and ready, but it's never going to be as good as buying an aftermarket case. And then I start watching videos and I see that all these people that are building these bigger cubic inch and stroked engines are using the new case. So guess what? All right, so it comes with this. I will be filling this thing out for sure. Cool green bag. Clearly it was dropped right there. We can fix that. So this right here, it just has a different energy emitting from it. That boring. Cool. So the first thing you're gonna notice, it's heavier. Noticeably heavier, but I like that. It's heavier because it's beefed up. It's an improved design. All that cool, beautiful, love it. So I was kind of hoping it would have that blue Empy sticker on there. It looks pretty cool. But this is what it is. I'm perfectly fine with it. Oh, another interesting fact that he told me. So then after all that, I said, man, well, sell me a good case. And he said, if I can find one, I'll sell it to you for $900. He says 1 out of every 15 cases that he finds is a perfect one for a rebuild. And he says he doesn't even know if he had one. That's why he was telling me to go ahead and buy this. And now I totally understand. So it's already machined for the 94mm pistons. If I'm going to drop money in something, it's go big or go home. Case savers, and we're going to be running 8mm head studs. So if you look in there, the case has already been clearanced for a stroker crank. I think up to 86mm it said. But I'm only running an 82mm. I'm building a 2276. Oh man, this is freaking beautiful. Look at that. Perfection. See what they did there? They just filled that whole gap up where it's weak on number 3. So as you can see, it's a dual relief case. They said they do something and make the oil galleys bigger. I have no idea about that just yet, but it has a plug on the front and a plug on the back. Yeah, I see another one. So looking at everything now, if you're going to go big engine, big bore, you need to go ahead and buy the new case. Buy it with the bore that you want. Everything's ready. It's clearanced. It's perfect, you know. And if you have an old engine like this, which we are going to build this one stock, and I'm going to have it on the stand just like the guy at the machine shop, where people can come over here, push the button and start it up like a display thing. And we're going to be building both of these on this channel for sure. So please, if I'm getting any information wrong, saying anything wrong, or something that you feel like you need to let me know, if you kindly will, to help me and other people, because not everybody knows about these things. Like I said, this is my first Beetle engine ever. I've only been into these for 2.5 months, so feel free to comment anything that you want. You can leave mean comments too, I don't care, but don't leave stupid comments like, man, you need to clean that floor up, buddy. You need to clean that table up there, buddy. So I built like 13.5 inches. We got to count the Datsun as a half. I did take it apart and put it back together, and it runs perfect. So YouTube is broadcast yourself. That's all I'm doing, just showing you what's going on. I'm not made of money, so you see how I bought this on sale right now. And then around Christmas time, I'm going to buy a stroker kit that's going to come with everything for the short block at least. So if you're new to Volkswagen like I am, or you're like, well, I'm going to build me a 2276 too, you need to pump your brakes a little bit and think about this. All that stock stuff from those engines, you really are not going to be using any of it on this one. You're going to have a bigger cam. You're going to have bigger flowing heads. So then you might end up having to buy bigger than stock intake parts, and then your carburation and linkage. Maybe you'll be able to use this, but I do have that Baja Igniter $300 kit for one of these. We'll do a video on it when we get there. So the stroker kit comes with the pistons and cylinders, cam, most of the stuff for the short block, and that's going to be about $1,300 to $1,500. The heads I'm going to buy, I'm just going to spend $1,000 on heads, $500 a piece, and then the carburation and linkage is probably going to cost another $1,000. So you can see real quick how this is going to add up. There's another part that we're going to be able to use, but you get the idea. All right, so I'm just documenting my experience, and you see what happened. 2 strikes, and hopefully we hit a home run with this one. So if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.